This time I'm talking about the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons texts of the late 1970s as a reading experience, particularly an instructional reading experience. You're picking up what to do, attitudes about what to do, contexts, and trying to fill in things with what must be when you're looking at what is or what to do. So, the quality of these texts, particularly the Dungeon Master's Guide, is well, there's a definite different authorship involved in some cases due to different people, but actually of one writer also has these different faces and voices that may as well be different authors talking about different things. And one of those, and okay, most of these different faces and voices are very compartmentalized by topic, probably indicating different times of writing. But one of them sort of fuses or diffuses in and out of the picture through a variety of different things. And this is a very grumpy and angry person. It's grim. It's actually unpleasant to read. You're trying to read this text, and suddenly somebody is really, really, really angry, either at everybody or at specific persons that they're referring to, and sometimes it seems at the actual reader. So it it's difficult. You're reading through, and you get the idea that the dude is mad. He doesn't like people who are involved with playing the game, and he doesn't like sometimes it seems even the game itself in a kind of weird way. So, what are the topics or the content of these passages? What is he so mad about? This particular face of Gary, I suppose you might call it that. And the first one, which I think is really obvious and is very clear in multiple places, concerns money. And in this case, you can kind of sympathize. It's caught in a bit of a trap, comes straightforwardly out and says finding and gathering lots and lots and lots of treasure is fundamental to the game. And it's very clear from all the numbers that if that doesn't happen, then none of the other mechanisms actually occur. So then it treats having all of these riches as a problem. We can't let adventurers basically be filthy rich. And there's various other things that feed into this. In some cases, not everywhere, but in some cases, the expressed desire that this whole thing be somewhat recognizable as, uh, I guess you would say, 13th century, 14th century Europe, and therefore trying to accord silver pieces and copper pieces to some perception of their role historically. Well, anyway, you're coping with this idea that we have a problem. We have to get the treasure. It's done its job. It's been found, and it's been the experience points have been gained. And now we have this troublesome stuff sitting around, which is going to give the players and the player characters so much that they can just have. You can debate about whether that's a problem or a feature, or maybe we walked ourselves into the problem and should examine how we walked ourselves into the problem before trying to patch it. You can debate all that or discuss it all you want to. What's interesting in the text is just how far it goes in saying, well, you can't play unless you throw away money. Leveling is a very good example. All of a sudden, we discover from the player's handbook, in no mention thereof, but now all of a sudden we discover that in order to go up a level, we have to spend a whole lot of money. Then there's in-game time as well, another whole topic for this text. But the that's a good example, and there are a ton of others. There's lots of stuff about not just, well, you might have to go talk to an NPC wizard who's got all kinds of scrolls and see if you can get a good bargain, which you might as well just leave up to the regular interactive rules whether dice oriented or not dice oriented, but they are there, and let that be what it is. But no, there's an admonition. You have to make those NPC wizards screw the player characters as hard as you can. There's a great deal of sudden talk as though we do have a canonical setting, which we don't, but as if we did, in terms of all of the taxes and tithes and fees. And the phrasing is very patronizing. It's very oriented toward, well, you don't realize what the the person of the Middle Ages would have to go through if they had all this money and all the tithes and taxes and fees and robberies and stuff that they would experience. And so the idea is that not only are you supposed to take all this money away from the players, but you're also characters, but you're also being scolded for not doing so. So that's one. This occurs, across a bunch of different topics. And then let's see my little list here. See, that's the trouble. There's so much of this sort of stuff. Then there's the kind of a really very upset defensiveness about rules that had been discussed elsewhere, particularly in the Player's Handbook, and that apparently had received the usual internet treatment. Wait, internet? Yes, Virginia. Before the internet, there was a kind of internet in slow motion through amateur press alliances and magazines, which are basically zines. I mean, the Dragon Magazine and the Strategic Review, I mean, we call them magazines, but they're zines. And to understand, I mean, it may be difficult. I don't want to patronize you like the text, but it may be difficult to grasp just how contentious and pushy and thought, the competition for thought leadership in these was a big deal. So you also have people who are grappling their way through the admittedly very diffuse and very unconstructed, non-centralized, perceived rules of Dungeons and Dragons up until this point. And they're basically making up stuff everywhere, some of which is very positive and exciting. The Illusionist appears, for example, all sorts of stuff. But here is Gary attempting to deliver what is effectively a huge case by case by case by case response to each of these. And in each case, his mandate, I think, is that he has to defend what we've got. So you end up with a lot of really cranky defensiveness, just rants about how this is perfectly reasonable, damn it. And you have stuff about alignment languages, you have stuff about playing monsters as NPCs, you have all sorts of things. Now, speaking strictly as a reader, thinking about an author, there is a very notable mind at work here. And so none of it, or very little of it, is just outright blithering. A great deal of it is discussable, like the monsters as player characters is discussable. So many other things are worthy of content, but they're not instructional for play, and they are often very, very angry. They're talking to basically somebody who's been dealing with a contentious, effectively an internet, as an object of attack, and even perceived object as attack just because somebody says something that isn't, the way it quote is. Remember, there isn't an is. So everybody is sort of fighting over what the is must be. And here you are, your job is to write the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is effectively to say the Bible. And you are going to say what is. And it may be, I'm guessing here, that in trying to review this material, that it was exhausting and excruciating and infuriating, and a great deal of the text, which is defending various rules. And some of it doesn't really even read very sincere. I mean, it's like he has to defend something that could arguably have been done differently or even better, but he's stuck with it. TSR has put it out in some form or another, or maybe even he wrote a column in Dragon Magazine, who knows, and now they're stuck with it, and he's got to defend it anyway. when you hit a passage like that in there, I mean, you feel like you have to go lie down. It's just you don't want to play the dude's game. I mean, he talks to you like that. You just don't want to do it. So it gets worse in the generalized statements here and there, which are very expressive of the stereotype of the killer dungeon master, the ruthless dungeon master. And although one could talk about fairness in a challenge context safely, I think, this is more than that. This is basically speaking of players as bad, ignorant people, and that the DM's job is basically to bring the fantasy, express the fantasy, make them enjoy the fantasy, and they're not going to do it. So you have just got to corral all of these vile, ignorant, and non fantasy reading and, basically lame people into something of some enjoyment. And it's as different from sort of the sprightly, playful presentation of the Holmes D&D as you can get. And again, it may well be a matter of Gygax's position at this time, having no power over the material, its editorial policy, its economic policy, and yet being shoved face first, by himself, no Dave Arneson, shoved up there face first to be, the voice, the face, and the target for Dungeons and Dragons. So I wouldn't want that, on a silver platter. And I can't imagine it would have been a good time for him. Well, anyway, those are some of the generalized issues through there. If you engage with these texts, armor up a little bit and have a nice comfy couch handy.